Hi, and welcome to the Level 2 Addition and Subtraction video. Here we're going to introduce the concept of negative numbers. Negative numbers are generated when subtracting a larger number from a smaller one, such as 15 minus 23. Now we can't directly display the answer minus 8 on the sotobon because it's impossible to place minus 8 beads on a rod. Therefore, we're going to display negative numbers through the use of complementary numbers. Now we've been using complementary numbers throughout our sotobon training in the form of 10 and 5 pairs. Now we'll generalize the idea to include complements with respect to any power of 10. So to find the complement of any number on the sotobon, we simply read the number of unused beads and add 1 to the total value. Unused beads are the beads that are not touching the reckoning bar. And we should note that we only add 1 to the rightmost non-zero rod. So let's look at a couple examples. Here on the left we have the number 3 on the sotobon. So 3's complement with respect to 10 would be 6 plus 1 or 7. Next we have 23, and 23's complement with respect to 100 would be 77. And then finally 157, complement with respect to 1000 would be 843. So let's look at some examples to see how we work with negative numbers on the sotobon. Let's take the problem 15 minus 87. So I'll go ahead and put 15 on the sotobon. And next we want to subtract 87, but we can't subtract 87 directly from 15, so we're going to borrow 100 first. And that will give us 115 on the sotobon. So now I can easily subtract 87 from 115. So I'll subtract the 87, and that leaves me with 28 on the sotobon. This means since I had to borrow, my answer is negative. So reading the complement, my answer is a minus 72. All right. Let's go ahead and continue with this problem by adding 96. So if we add 96, we end up with 124 on the sotobon. So because this interim sum is greater than 100, the 100 that we borrowed before, we now know that the number has gone positive again. So we can subtract that 100 that we borrowed previously, and then we can simply just read our final answer, which is 24. Okay, let's take a look at the situation where we might have to borrow more than once within a problem. So let's consider the problem 34 minus 97 minus 2,399. Okay, so putting 34 on the sotobon, and then the next thing we want to do is subtract 97. Well, like before, we're going to need to borrow 100. So subtracting 97, I would end up with 37 on the sotobon. But since we had to borrow, we read this answer, or this interim sum, from the complement, which is a minus 63. Next we want to subtract the 2,399. Now it would seem we need to borrow another 10,000, but that would mean we would have borrowed 100 from the previous step plus this 10,000, which would be 10,100. This wouldn't work since we can only read complementary numbers that are a power of 10 on the sotobon. And that means numbers like 10, 100, or 1,000. So instead of adding 10,000, we'll add 10,000 minus 100, or 9,900. This way, the total amount that we borrowed will now be 10,000, which is a power of 10. So I'm simply going to add a couple of 9s there so that we can continue our problem. Okay, now this might sound a little complicated, but the rule is quite simple. if we need to borrow more than once, we just simply add enough 9s to the left in order to complete the subtraction. So let's go ahead and do the subtraction by subtracting the 2,399. So the 2,399, and that leaves us with 7,538 on the soroban. So reading the complementary number, that means our answer is a minus 2,462. Okay, just to make an earlier point a little clearer, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 18 from this problem as well. Now if I wanted to read this complement, I wouldn't add 1 to the rightmost rod because it's 0. So I would have to add 1 to the rightmost non-zero rod, which is the 7 here. So reading this complementary number, it would be minus 2,480. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and jump into our first sample problem. And we're going to start off with 32,276. Okay, so I place that on my soroban. And then next, I want to subtract 84,383. But to do that, I'm first going to have to borrow 100,000. Okay, so just like we did before, now we borrowed the 100,000. Now I can easily subtract the 84,383. So I'll go ahead and do that. Subtract the 84,383. Okay, so that leaves this on the soroban, and we're going to go ahead and continue with the problem, and next we're going to add 3,607. So we'll add 3,607. So that leaves us with this interim sum that would be a minus 48,500. Okay, so let's continue on with the problem. And next we're going to add 105,678. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll add 105,678. Okay, so notice that we now have a number on the soroban that's greater than 100,000, which we had previously borrowed. So that means that our interim sum has now turned positive again. So we can go ahead and subtract that 100,000 that we borrowed before. So I'll go ahead and do that. So now we have a positive interim sum. All right, let's continue on with the problem. And next we're going to add 5,768. So I'll do 5,768. Okay, so here again we're remaining with a positive value on the soroban. And continuing on, we'll add another 5,788. So 5,788. Okay, there we go. So now we have this positive interim sum of 68,734. So next we want to subtract 752,687. Well, again, this time we're going to have to borrow $1 million in order to do that. So I'll add one way over here. And now we'll subtract the 752,687. So that'll be 7 5, 2, 6, 8, and finally a 7. Okay, so this is what we end up with, and now we're again with a negative interim sum. And then for the last step of our problem, we're going to subtract an additional 9,774. So I'll subtract 9,774, and this will give us our final answer, which again is a negative answer. So we read the complements, and this is 693,727. So that's a good example of a level 2 addition and subtraction problem involving negative numbers. Now there are other examples in this PDF file. I certainly encourage you to go through it and make sure you understand everything, and good luck with working with negative numbers.